Hi, Morton Meisner is a name you may be familiar with. He was in charge of Channel 2 News for about a decade. He's been an agent to a lot of well-known people and well-known media people in particular here in Detroit, grew up right here in Detroit in the Oak Park area, and has written a book about his various experiences called Enough to be Dangerous, One Agent's Life in TV News and Rock and Roll. Mort Meisner joins us on the program. Hello, Mort.
Hey, Mitch. Hello, man. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. I want to ask about the title, Enough to be Dangerous. Usually they say that about a little bit of knowledge, but I want to know what reference it is for you.
Yeah, it's really several things, and it's funny, my 27-year-old son came up with it. Well, in part, certainly there's been periods in my life where I was a danger to myself, really struggling with cocaine use from 1981 to 1989, certainly. Then a lot of investigative work I did, undercover work as a news guy, nearly killed several different times, infiltrating child pornography rings and boiler room scams and things like that. And really, based on that, is what my son Mark came up with.
Interesting. I want to ask about the time that you were in charge of the news at Channel 2. Tell our audience who were the people that they saw on the news during that time that you oversaw.
Yeah, Huel Perkins, who is still there. I hired Huel in St. Louis from Baton Rouge, and then I brought Huel here to Detroit. Had Rich Fisher, Sherry Margolis, even brought Bill Bonds over towards the end of his career. Hodak was over there for, and I mean, it was when I took that station over.
Now I want to ask you about Bill Bonds in particular. You write about him in the book extensively, and you actually were working at Channel 7 when Bill Bonds was the thing there, and you had a pretty low-level position there, production assistant, and then ultimately ended up bringing him over to TV2. Tell me your thoughts and memories, particularly about Bill Bonds, because there were a few.
Yeah, Billy taught me a lot. You know, one of the ways I got away from being a production assistant and moved up is Bill told me, never learn to be good at menial tasks. I said, what do you mean? He said, don't learn how to change a typewriter ribbon. Don't learn how to change copying machine paper. I said, well, what am I going to do when I'm told? He said, go to the bathroom, disappear. But Bill was really, I worked with a lot of great news anchors in my career, and Bill fought his demons, but was a real smart guy. He was a terrific writer. He held himself and those in the newsroom accountable. After newscasts, he'd hold court in the newsroom, and he would demand to know who wrote this, piece of junk. And someone would raise their hand, and he would say, GD, we're better than that. And he'd throw the script sometimes and storm out. But he taught me a lot about good journalism, and I never worked with anyone like him before or after.
Yeah, well, most people who knew him say the same thing. Of course, he had very high standards for news, but could not live up to those high standards for personal comportment when it came to alcohol in particular. You wrote about some of those encounters with him. Tell us what's one time where you may have seen him inebriated or whatever that really sticks in your mind as maybe the worst.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there was the night Hubert Humphrey died. We all went out drinking to, it was Mr. Joe's when it was on Northwestern, 12 Mile Road. And it was a night when we left. I was concerned that I'd never see him again, at least alive. He was just packing them down, putting them away. And as a young pup, as I was, I wouldn't tell him no. And, of course, by the way, by that, I was paying for the drinks because Billy never picked up a tab. And and he fought his demons, and that was one occasion where he was multiple sheets to the wind, for
But
sure.
yeah, didn't you write in the book that he did a obituary for Hubert Humphrey basically off the top of his head?
Yeah, this is amazing. In one of my favorite Bill stories, the night Humphrey died, Bill came to my desk and said, "Kid, I want you to stand by the United Press International machine, and if Humphrey buys it during the newscast, I want you to tell me." So 10 bells, a bulletin goes off on the wire machine at 11:24, and I hightail it into the studio while they're saying goodnight. And Bill says, "Morty Meisner has just walked into the studio. What do you have, kid?" And he has me come out on the set. I hand him the wire copy, 3 words, and I still have it. It says, "Hubert Humphrey dead." They're wrapping Bill to say goodnight, and Bill tells the floor manager, "We're running over." And he does a 7-minute and 42-second obit, no script.
Wow.
And that night, before he got hammered, we're at Mr. Joe's, and I said, "Billy, that was the best ad lib I've ever heard." And he turns to me wryly and says, "Kid, there are no ad libs." And he explained to me whenever it was just basically committed to his brain whenever it happened. And he leaned into the camera and after the obit and said, "Good night, Happy Warrior," because that was Humphrey's nickname, of course. And he was just brilliant. And
Wow. Now, ironically, you also were the guy who fired him from his last stop. And you wrote in a quote, "I went into his office and said, 'Billy, pack it up and go home. You smell like a gin mill.'"
Yeah.
That must have taken some guts.
Well, yeah, I called my boss, Steve Antonetti, and said, we got to fire Bill. And in fact, what I said, we're going to put I'm almost ashamed of the lingo we used to use. I said, "We got to put a bullet in him. He's drunk." So I walked over to his office, and I said what you just quoted me on, and he said, "Morty, it's mouthwash." I said, "Billy, it's mouthwash covering up the booze. Pack your stuff up and get out." Yet, we remained good friends. He would call me and say, "Do you think you could help Billy make a comeback?" And I said, "Billy, you burned every bridge." Yet, we remained friends. I mean, he knew he was in his heart of hearts. He knew he was wrong. He knew he had those issues. And we had a mutual respect. I loved the guy, and it broke my heart when he died.
We're talking to Mort Meisner, the book, Enough to be Dangerous. Of course, he had a career as an agent, later in the media world, also in the rock and roll world. Kevin, I'm doing this story for you because Kevin's an old rock and roll lover like I am myself. Exactly. And Mort writes about one time he walked in on Chuck Berry in a dressing room where Chuck was the verb you use is entertaining 2 young women. I don't assume he was juggling.
No, the lawyer made me change what was in there, my lawyer. And it's funny because I cleared this with Chuck Berry's son, and I told them I was going to be using it. So I was emceeing the show, and I announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome rock and roll legend Chuck Berry," and he doesn't come out. And the crowd starts chanting, "Chuck, Chuck, Chuck, Chuck." So I go back into the dressing room, and there he is with 2 twins, blonde twins.
Oh, my God.
And I say, "Chuck, come on, man, we got to go." And he looks over his left shoulder, and the women are laying there, and he says, quote, "Let me finish up here," end quote. And I closed the door, and he presumably finished up. And then he went on stage, and the audience knew nothing, but unfortunately, I did.
Yeah. You can never hear my ding-a-ling again the same way after you've experienced that.
That's funny.
Hang on for a second. We'll take a look at the traffic, and then we'll finish our conversation with Mort Meisner here.
Thank you.
Talking to Mort Meisner, who for many years ran Fox 2 News, or I don't think it was Fox 2 back then, but Channel 2 News. And as a talent agent, represented a lot of rock and roll artists and also a lot of TV and radio personalities. I can't remember if you ever called to represent me at one point or another. I think you
Man, I would have, but we did have the chance to work together a little while when you were doing those great commentaries at WJDK.
Right, that's what I remember. And, of course, you've represented Glenda and Diana Lewis, some of the folks from Still Do, some of the folks from WWJ. I want to ask you about Detroit local news. You know, I've lived in multiple cities, so I've observed, and there's a lot of cities in this country, the real big cities, where they can't wait to get rid of who's ever there. You know, you got like a 3 to 5 year life cycle, and then no matter, even if you were good, you got to go. Detroit, to me, has always been unique. I mean, it seems like you get frequent flyer points. The longer you're on, the longer everybody loves you. Witness Bill Bonds. You know, who else would put up with Bill Bonds falling off chairs and doing the news and come right back and everybody loved him? What can you say about the Detroit local TV news market that makes it unique?
Well, because we don't have real Hollywood celebrities here. We have media celebrities and famous people like that, and yourself, you're of course included in that, and also a great author and speaker. But you know, the audience develops an affinity for talent like Diana Lewis, and they become a part of the fabric of the community. When I hired Huel Perkins in the early 90s, Bob Talbert called me up and wrote that Huel Perkins won't last 18 months here. He's too skinny. He's got a crooked jaw and all this other stuff. And, of course, Bob was right. He didn't last 18 months. He's been here 28 years.
Yeah.
And I just think these folks are out around town. They're seen. They trust them. You know, when Mort Krim first came here, he failed miserably, and they almost blew it up over at, it was WWJ TV at the time, then it transitioned to WDIV, but then he made it, and of course, he became huge here.
Right.
But I think no better example than Diana Lewis, who was synonymous with kids' issues, immunizations for poor children, and these people are so beloved, and I think a lot of it is, again, we have sports stars, and we have TV and radio stars, and we sure love them here.
Well, these stories and more in Mort's book, we recommend you pick it up, Enough to be Dangerous, One Agent's Life in TV News and Rock and Roll. It just came out today, I think, right?
It did. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and it's available everywhere, and my publisher told me, my publisher's local, that it's off to a good start.
There you go. You get it at Amazon.com, or even find out more at MortMeisner.com as well.
Yes.
Congratulations on doing a book. I know how hard that can be. And thanks for sharing some of those stories with us, Mort. It was fascinating.
Mitch, thank you so very much, and best to your family as always.
Thank you very much. We'll take a break and come back with more on 760 WJR.